because we're not an education company, we're really a consumer and a collaboration company. And so we've got a variety of tools that are extremely useful in the educational framework and the education setting. I think it's really interesting that the title of this session, I think platform is a great word because there's elements of what make something a platform versus just a tool that I think are really important. And a lot of that is about openness and integration possibilities and utilization in other areas. And if you think about what Google's tried to do, we've tried to really provide a technology platform that can be used by students to collaborate on presentations, on documents. It can be used by schools to publish content, to give access to information to students, and also can be used by content creators to both publish works, to interact with their users, and to monetize some of their work that's online. And so I think we really view ourselves in that platform vein of providing a set of fairly standard technologies. Standard's maybe not the right word, but generic in the multi-purpose sense, technologies that are really applicable in the education market. And what we've seen is that educators, when they get into them and take the time to understand them, find them to be amazingly powerful platforms to do a whole different set of things. And the biggest problem is often getting people to take a look and ask the question, what if we did things a little differently? And a lot of times it's the things that people have been trying to do for years, and we're caught up so much in exactly the steps that we're used to doing as opposed to the objective we're trying to achieve, and what's the best technology, whether that's a digital or an analog technology, to achieve that outcome.
There is sort of it's a floor wax, it's a whipped topping bit about your answer. I just want to address for
It's both. And other things.
But so I just want to help the folks here get their heads around this, and me as well. Give me an example of how an educational publisher or a classroom might use Google Apps.
Well, simple examples. So some of the Google Apps, the two that are probably most relevant are one that I would call Google Docs and Google Sites. Google Docs is a word processor, a spreadsheet, a presentation tool, so I never do use PowerPoint anymore. I use Google Presentations. The power of these tools comes in the fact that because they're online and not traditional kind of installed on your computer software, I see at least one guy nodding, so that tells me I'm on the right track, you can collaborate with people. And so a great example in the classroom, we've seen students even down into the middle school area where their teacher is assigning group projects, maybe group data collection, a presentation by 3 students to the class, and they're able to log on at the same time or at different times and collaboratively create that presentation. And the teacher is able to be shared in that experience. And so as opposed to waiting for the first draft that comes 3 days and then taking 3 days to review everybody's drafts at once and then sending back comments and then waiting another 3 days, teachers are actually logging in 2 or 3 times a day, leaving comments for students as they're creating work. And it turns into much more of a collaborative, interactive process as opposed to a one-time back and forth. So it's a very simple example.
Sorry for interrupting, but so theoretically, somebody, let's say there's supplemental publishers used to doing, worksheets, activity type things, and workbooks. Theoretically, they could do something that would work in Google Apps to be collaborative version.
It's not that theoretical. They can absolutely do it today.
Michael, let's talk a bit about platforms. You work with, as I understand it, and it's a pretty impressive website that you should tell people about here, but you work with everything from wikis to blogs and such and transform those, among other things. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Since I'm the only brand name here that lives in you guys have street cred. Rochester Institute of Technology itself is almost 16,000 students, very career-focused as a university. And about a year and a half ago, we launched this venture called the Open Publishing Lab. It came out of the School of Print Media. It's kind of a central point because we have this background in this thing called print that you've heard about, right? And it's been changing a lot. Right? So we decided that we wanted to look at attacking the issues in publishing and started to build tools that made sense. And the first thing we did is reach out to the community of our IT and brought in a bunch of software engineers, industrial designers, and just basically people who are interested in kind of do-it-yourself, how do we make it happen approach. And we created what it was. So within roughly a year's time, we built 3 different kind of apps or platforms almost, all basically in a purely open source kind of approach to building tools. With that, the general approach we take is we want to accomplish task X. So I'll give you one example. Last year at a festival that we ran on campus, we were approached because we have this rich history with newspapers saying, could you guys maybe find a way to produce a newspaper for us? I said, well, it's 2008. We should be able to do one on the hour. Live content, written, published, produced, printed, distributed on online as well. And then as we got talking and started the development process after we committed to it 1 hour later, one of my colleagues in another building was doing a Google Earth install. So to tell you, we'll get the GPS coordinates for all the story locations, we'll have that synchronized in the back end. So as soon as it publishes out to the web, it immediately goes to a Google Earth install and so on. So this, what we basically did was we looked at the overall problem. We want to get news on the hour. How do we do that? Let's dissect the process, content, words, content, images, metadata so we can track it, cool stuff like GPS and how we can synchronize with Google Earth, and then search what tools are appropriate. Tested a few of them, and inside 4 weeks' time, using an open source software called Drupal, we're able to produce that, and then that synchronized to standard platforms all the way out to PDF.
And you also take, if I remember correctly, blogs and wikis and publish them as books.
We do that too. So last year's release was the iNews, or Innovation News Project, which is the one I described very briefly. This year's release later this month will be their date, so don't hold me to it quite yet, but think about it, the 25th of this month. Will be Page to Pub, and that was partially sponsored by Hewlett-Packard Labs in Bristol through a grant that helped pay our student workforce. But that tool was designed specifically to be able to display the content from any online repository or blog or wiki or anyplace else, go through kind of a transform engine that we built. It comes out as an EPUB, a standard EPUB. And then from there, we do a secondary transformation into a printed ebook.
By the way, you can sell that on Kindle and it can be available in less than 24 hours.
We're currently trying to jump it. Well, so we are. One of my students is doing it. I don't. This is different. I don't do software. I advise everything. But one of my students has made his mission to make sure that you can read everything you want our way.
Great.
But we chose EPUB because it is an open standard in the sense that it's not proprietary to any one vendor. It plays well with most. And that's one of the missions of the lab experience is this idea of access. We want everything to be open source whenever possible. If there's an open source way to do it, we go that way. If there's not one yet, we build a proprietary and then benchmark how do we get open source to do that. And that was cool. But in the same breath, the idea of taking collaborative content, I can build it off any existing place, starts the conversation. But as we've started to work even just inside our own university walls, we're finding that as we talk to people in other disciplines, that they're already doing it. I'll give you one quick example. There's a gentleman named Paul Craig. He's a professor in the College of Science, and he has this entire text up as a wiki.